I'm David R. Jones, President of the Community Service Society of New York, and this is what's on the urban agenda. The Republican Congress has completed the first 100 days of its contract with America. Among the basic changes anticipated is how welfare and housing subsidy programs will be implemented. Instead of using entitlements where the federal government sets standards of who can receive help, the states will control the funding through block grants. The question that remains is how this will impact on the poor, particularly the 1.1 million on welfare in New York City. To discuss the issue, I'm pleased to have with me today Congressmembers Nydia Velazquez and Major Owens. Representative Velazquez represents the Lower East Side, Chinatown, and parts of Brooklyn and Queens. Elected to Congress in 1992, she became the first Puerto Rican woman in the House of Representatives. She sits on the House Banking and Financial Services and Small Business Committees. Representative Owens is in his 7th term as Congressman, representing Crown Heights, Flatbush, and parts of Ocean Hill-Brownsville. A senior member of the Economic and Employment Opportunities Committee, he also sits on the Government Reform and Oversight Committee and various subcommittees. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
I'm afraid I wish these were happier times for us. But I'd like to start perhaps with you, Major, to talk to the audience about what is this block grant stuff. I don't think many of our constituents or your constituents know what this is going to mean for us. How do you see it if this goes forward?
David, when you hear the term block grant, then think the word swindle. Usually the block grant comes in a package that's really a swindle for the American people in terms of the federal government pushing off its responsibilities and backing away from usually the entitlement part of a program. Programs under the federal government, such as aid to families with dependent children, are entitlements. It means that anybody in America who has the need and is eligible will get it, and if we have to appropriate more money at the federal government level, we'll appropriate more money. But when you have a block grant and you push it off to the states, whether you're talking about aid to family with dependent children or you're talking about school lunches, once the money runs out, then they will not take care of any more people. They'll say, we just don't have any more money. So it is a swindle in terms of the American people lose the right to be taken care of regardless of what the treasury of a particular state or city might show. Balancing the budget is what they're really concerned with. The part of the contract with America that passed the House of Representatives but has not passed the Senate is still the driving force behind everything else that they are doing that is most significant in this contract with America. They want to cut down the amount of money the federal government spends for the people, to promote the general welfare. We have a contract with America already. It's in the Constitution. To promote the general welfare is of no concern to the Republicans who now control the House of Representatives and the Senate. They want to promote the elite. They want to promote a small segment of America, the group that's getting most of the wealth, has most of the wealth already and is benefiting most from the escalating prosperity of America. They want to enhance that. And they want to throw overboard all those people who in any way get in the way of these handful of people who are the elite, who are making most of the money and enjoying the benefits of a prosperous America.
Congresswoman, what do you think will be seen on the streets of your district if this goes ahead?
We're going to see a lot of not only men, homeless people in the street. We're going to be seeing women and children without any shelter. We're going to see people dying, and that's a reality. We're going to see people that will not have not only access to quality health care, but the money will not be there to provide even basic needs for these people. This is really very scary. It must worry us as a community. This is a contract that has been designed, and the center of the contract, as my colleague here has stated, is not about the welfare, well-being of the American people, but how can we make sure that we have enough money, that we can save money to provide the kind of tax breaks that will benefit the privileged few in this nation.
You know, one of the things that comes up, and I think they've been able to split away issues and impacts on the poor from what will happen to working people and even people of modest middle-class means. Have you gotten any sense, either of you, of what the impacts might be if I'm a working Joe sitting there in the middle of one of the boroughs? Will I be impacted by any of this? I think there's a sense at this point, no, but I'm not quite so sure.
Working people will be very hard hit. Right. Working people will not benefit from the tax cut. The tax cut is designed to give the biggest benefits to people who are making $100,000 or more, and even as you go up, you get even bigger benefits. There will be very little relief for working people on the one hand, and the pennies that they get from this tax cut will be offset by the fact that they will be paying more for their health care. They will have their pensions jeopardized. They'll have even Social Security down the road is jeopardized, and certainly as they are getting older, Medicare is jeopardized. The care for their parents immediately is jeopardized in terms of if they need home care, nursing homes. The likelihood that you'll have adequate care for elderly people who are parents of working people is nil. Their children will find themselves in situations where the cost of tuition for college will go up. They are reaching into the student loan program now to get more money. They want to save $12 billion over 5 years. So what they're doing is imposing, taking out the government subsidy of student loans during the time students are in school. The government pays the interest while you're in school. Right. You pick it up afterwards. Well, they increased greatly the cost of going to college when they do that. It's $12 billion they expect to get. On the other hand, they're going to spend $12 billion on an F-22 fighter plane manufactured in Marietta, Georgia, Newt Gingrich's district, that nobody needs. You know, I call these guys barbarians, high-tech barbarians. They're very bright, they're very smart, yes, but they have no compassion. At the same time, they make a decision to save money, to balance the budget, to head off bankruptcy for America by taking money out of the school lunch program and the student loan program. They're going to increase the defense budget and build unnecessary weapons like the F-22 and another Seawolf submarine. And in general, they were trying to get Star Wars. We think we've put a damp on that, but they may even keep Star Wars in the budget while they're cutting back drastically on programs that are going to feed, clothe, and house people. And the housing is critical because the biggest hit is going to be taken by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Some billion dollars has already been taken out of this year's budget, and they are proposing to eliminate the department altogether.
Yeah, David, I just would like to add, what we are doing and what we are seeing with this contract with America is going back to the nightmare of the 80s, you know, trickle-down economics. And the working families in this nation were the ones who suffer, were the ones that were the victims of the Reaganomics of the 80s. As Mayor pointed out, you know, whatever we're going to get back, working families, those families making $75,000, they're going to get in tax cuts $36 a month. Not enough to even buy textbooks for their children, not enough to even pay for $1,000 in tuition fee increase that these college students are going to get here in New York State. So we need to fight this back and show what the contract on America really is.
I think the other form of fight we have to do is obviously broaden just who is going to be impacted by this. One of the discussions I had with some small business people, there's a sudden growing realization that people on welfare don't keep the money for more than a couple of days. They basically support the little stores and the other, to get food particularly, but everything from food to Pampers to basic utilities are what the money doesn't stay with them.
Beyond that, the people on welfare use Medicaid.
Absolutely.
And other people not on welfare use Medicare. The biggest industry in my district is the healthcare industry. Right. The biggest employer in my district is Kings County Hospital. In New York City, one of the biggest industries is the healthcare industry. 1/3 of the employees may be dismissed from their jobs in healthcare over the next 2 or 3 years when you have the combination of the federal cuts and Medicaid is being cut. They're not talking about it. Democrats are not even putting up much of defense. The White House sort of takes it for granted. Medicaid is going to be cut. Yeah. We're talking about Medicare and fighting Medicare cuts, but it's sort of a given thing that Medicaid is going to be cut. So you're going to have a downsizing of the healthcare industry. Not that we don't still need it, but it is going to be downsized drastically. And the salaries and wages of the people who work in our hospitals and various aspects of the healthcare industry won't be there anymore. It's going to have a major impact on the economy of this city. When Rudy Giuliani makes a statement that poor people ought to move away, and I think it's a horrendous comment from a mayor. It's bad enough to have Roger Starr saying we should have planned shrinkage years ago, but he wasn't the mayor. But now to have a mayor saying that the poor people ought to move away. When the poor people go, a lot of other things go with them. If half the poor, half the youngsters in the Board of Education, under the Board of Education, our school system leave because at least half are poor, they left the city, half the teachers would be gone too, half the administrators, and you have an impact across the board. So we're talking about the viability of New York City as a society and as an economy.
And poor people do not come to New York State to get welfare benefits. They're going to stay here. So we better work collectively to fight all these cuts because after all, they're going to remain here. The needs will be greater. And not only healthcare represents the largest employer in your district, it represents the largest employer in New York State.
Mm-hmm. Has anyone done the analysis of this, that by cutting basically low-wage workers, what impact on a locality, what the ripple out in terms of tax collections, in terms of other, sort of ancillary impacts? Because again, I feel that as progressives and people fighting for people who are in poverty, we've become sort of boxed. They've been able very effectively to convince many working people of all races that suddenly this is not going to touch them. That these are ne'er-do-wells and unacceptable people, and therefore it's perfectly all right to cut them. And
well, the people that the mayor is laying off in city government are not welfare recipients.
Right.
They are part of the working poor, working middle class. The people that the governor will be laying off, and federal government is downsizing. Right. Large percentage, disproportionate number of minorities and people coming out of poverty are in civil service jobs, and they're going to lose that. With an immediate impact on communities, of course, where they live.
And the union concessions also with city officials,
right.
Losing salaries and benefits.
That's right, decreasing salaries. This is working families.
It's interesting, in New York, of course, the history was always public service jobs were the way the new ethnic groups, whether they be Jews, Irish, or Italians, that was their first stop towards establishing a decent life. Mm-hmm. And that's now being cut off basically for this newest population.
And there are the business leaders as well as, of course, the people at City Hall who believe that we can have a viable city and a viable economy if we just put the squeeze and the pressure on poor people and force them to move away. First, they are not moving away. There's nowhere for them to go. Where will they go? Will they go to Bob Dole's district in Kansas where the welfare benefits are better than anywhere else? Through the food subsidy program, the farmers don't even have to have a means test, and they get in Dole's district between $30,000 and $40,000 a year in a check for not doing any work, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. No work, just not growing grain and not plowing the fields. They get a subsidy from the taxpayers. That's pretty good. Can we send out people out there to get a share of that? I don't think so. Yeah. Is Newt Gingrich going to let us get some of the jobs in Marietta, Georgia, where we are manufacturing the F-22, which is an unnecessary weapon, but at least it provides jobs? No, I don't think so. Where will the poor in New York City go? They will not be able to go anywhere. They're going to stay right here. Let's have some policies which talk about expanding the economy of New York, getting more revenue from places where we ought to be getting revenue, the Port Authority, the State
the corporations.
Thruway Authority, a lot of ways in which we've given away money. Let's double the tourist industry, which is a viable industry here, the #1 industry in the city. Let's find ways to make it work better. Let's do things that deal with an economy that's going to support the people
here. You mentioned the tourist industry. Obviously, as quality of life begins to deteriorate more rapidly in the city of New York, it's going to be a joke to try to attract businesses, and even a greater joke to try to bring people into the streets of a now real mean-spirited city. And somehow this connection is not made.
Yeah, there is a connection, a clear connection between the lack of services, the lack of jobs, and the crime rate in New York City or elsewhere. The fact of the matter, we're going to lose this current year, the summer jobs program. And it's not enough to say young people volunteer to work. You know, they want to earn some money to go back to school.
The other thing, Congresswoman, the contract talks a lot about is family responsibility. This is talked about in terms of poor children have too many children and they get on welfare to avoid work. What is your response as you go around?
Well, let me say
country?
that in the analysis that we made, there is not a clear connection between welfare benefits and the birth rate in this country, among poor women. What we have to do here is, if we want to get people off welfare, is by putting together a comprehensive plan that really addresses the real issue here. It's about jobs, training, retraining. It's about health benefits. It's not only to create kind of jobs that doesn't have high salaries and no benefits, no health benefits. If we don't provide those elements, of course, people are going to remain on welfare, because for a woman who has 4 children to go and get a low-paying job without not health benefits and to have to pay rent is not enough. She will go back to welfare because she needs to get a medical plan, some health benefits, and at least she could get Medicaid if she's not working and she's on welfare. So this Personal Responsibility Act that we just passed shows the lack of compassion and the lack of responsibility of the majority, the Republican majority in Congress. They do not want to end welfare as we know it. The only way to end welfare is by putting together a legislative piece that is tough on work and not tough on women and children, and that is the nature of the Personal Responsibility Act that the Republican majority passed in Congress.
I think people don't realize how low the benefits are in welfare. Across the country, you're talking about an average of less than $300 a month, average across the country. In New York, what is it, $600 for a family of 3? It is a small portion of our budget, and like any other program, welfare, the administration of it can be improved. The minute the program was invented, somebody was out there trying to figure out how to beat it, so abuses do take place, and that's the business of government and the business of administration, to continually try to cut out abuses and make certain that we get our dollars worth for the money we spend. Abuses are far greater in other areas, and nobody has ever talked about eliminating the farmer's home loan mortgage, for instance. They forgave $11.8 billion over a 5-year period. Do you hear what I'm saying? They forgave it. They gave it to farmers, and they were not necessarily poor farmers, because there was no means test in getting the loans. And I didn't say 11.5 million, I said $11.5 billion were forgiven. In the savings and loan swindle, the biggest swindle in the history of civilization, we're talking about $500 billion that went down the drain through the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. Has anybody said we should get rid of the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation and not have that there, the government, taxpayers standing behind the banks, even when the banks swindle a large number of us out of that money?
And the most recent one, the bailout of Mexico, $40 billion. No one asked about that.
Let's talk about something else. Both of your districts contain a lot of immigrant people. What about the attack on immigrants as being sort of the ones that are diverting U.S. jobs?
The first attack on illegal immigrants, then the attack on legal immigrants. Juliana follows through and attacks the poor in general. You can see the direction that we're going.
There are so many myths, and you'll see, as Mayor Owens said, years ago it was illegal immigrants. Now it's legal immigrants, and later on will be Hispanics, because we don't look and sound like the common American person. So, it's this climate that we are in Washington and in this nation, the anti-immigration bashing. It's just trying to victimize the victims. It's not welfare reform and whatever is happening with the failure of welfare in terms of getting people off welfare is not based on legal immigrants or illegal immigrants. After all, these people here, they work, they earn $240 billion, and they paid in taxes $90 billion. So these are rights. They pay taxes, they are entitled to receive the benefits that come with that.
Let's talk about, we've painted a very grim picture.
But let me just add something here.
I'm sorry.
This is going to backfire, because legal immigrants, and the debate in California with Proposition 187, what this is doing is that many legal immigrants, 11 million legal immigrants in this country, that they are just, they qualify to become citizens. For years they have been in this country as legal immigrants, and they don't bother in becoming citizens. Right now there is a big wave in California, and on July 6th, the Hispanic members of Congress, we are doing a National Citizenship Day, and we're gonna empower those people. We're gonna make everything possible. We met with the Director of Immigration Services, and we told her, we better have a mechanism in place that it doesn't take 3 years after one person submitted an application and pay her fee or his fee to become citizen, that it will not take that long. And they are computerizing the whole system. It will take now from 6 to 8 months. That is what they're saying.
Let's talk about what are you, as very senior and important representatives, are telling the people as to what we should do about this. Obviously, we've painted a picture that's awfully grim, but we're not without resources or power in this country or in this city. What should we start talking about if people are concerned about this kind of trend?
The immediate task of legislators is to stop as much of this legislation from going through as possible. In the House of Representatives, we don't have the votes. The Republicans roll right over us, but we have a president who is a Democrat in the White House, and it's our job to do the things necessary to encourage him to veto most of this legislation, to give him the backbone and to make him understand that there's a large part of America, I think the overwhelming majority of America, that disapproves of what's being done with this contract against America. We have to put up a good fight and make certain that the information gets out there to the public, that we communicate to them the fact that all is not lost, they don't lapse into fatalism. We must do that so that public opinion will express itself in stronger and more visible terms, and the president can see where the public is. Right now, I must say our Democratic leadership is not offering very strong leadership because they're looking over their shoulder to see where the public is. And we need the public to let them know that they don't like what's going on, and we must do all we can to encourage that. Demonstrations are very important. We had a number of demonstrations in the city of New York that I think have been played down by the press and the television, but it's important to keep doing it and send a message that people are upset and they're going to escalate, and send a message to our own followers that there's still energy within the people who want to oppose these things. And then we have to offer some alternative plans. I'm the chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus Alternative Budget, and we have to show people what we could be doing instead, where the cuts can be made. If you want to downsize government, make it more efficient, there are a number of places you should go after. We should deal with Seawolf submarines and F-22s. We should deal with the holy, sacred farm subsidy that nobody's been willing to touch all these years. A number of places that we're going to show in the Congressional Black Caucus Alternative Budget, which I hope the Hispanic Caucus will endorse, and the Progressive Caucus, how we can balance the budget. If you push us to balance the budget, we can balance the budget and at the same time increase funds for education.
That's right.
And increase funds in areas which will create jobs. And then we have to deal with the revenue problem. You know, we have to show that there are ways to get more revenue without taxing people personally with income tax. I'm all in favor of downsizing personal income taxes over the next 10 years drastically, while we go after other revenue sources, like get back to taxing the corporations so that they carry at least half the burden as they did about 25 years ago. They carry less and less. It's about 25% of the tax burden carried by corporations. Then there are new sources of revenue in terms of we're selling off frequency bands in the sky. You know, we'll find a way that property that belongs to all the people up there is used for the benefit of all the American people. And on it goes.
Yeah.
I would say this is a collective fight, and Mayor Owens is very, he's correct in saying that we have to, the American public have to let the president know that we are expecting from him to take a stand firm against these cuts. But also, and we Democrats, we have to show that we are all for balancing the budget. We are all for deficit reduction. But there has to be a fair debate, a fair legislative debate. They want to balance the budget by the year 2002. To me, that's impossible under the present circumstances when they are giving these huge tax breaks to the 1% of the American families in this country and the American corporations. And as Mayor Owens pointed out, we are willing to discuss and to show how can we balance the budget and how can we reduce the deficit. Let's bring into this debate the element also of corporate welfare, the $228 billion that we are giving away annually, and let's also close loopholes in the tax code in this nation. I don't know if you saw on the Senate side the debate on those American citizens who are renouncing, who are relinquishing their citizenship in order not to pay taxes to this government. And on the Senate side, the Republicans, they back away from this amendment.
This is another discussion, but I'm wondering just very briefly what you people think. Is the kind of conservative swing starting to produce other kinds of virulent anti-government, Oklahoma obviously is what I'm talking about. Is this giving aid and comfort to people who want to take us a lot further than just a short trip away from mainstream democratic principle? Are we tampering with things that may have much more serious implications?
I think basically the contract with America is an extreme approach, and it pushes everything. The language that they use, of course, to try to justify it, pushes everything. To try to make all those cuts over such a short period of time pushes us into a corner, pressures a large number of people, but in the language that they use against the government, against the president, but pretending that they are outside it all, and yet their policies are protecting the greatest vested interest, that language sets off people out there, and they are all for guns. They want to repeal the ban on assault weapons. That message is the worst message, because it's one thing to disagree with the government and be a dissident, but when you got guns and you subscribe to a philosophy of violence, you become more dangerous.
Thank you, Congressman Owens and Congresswoman Velazquez, for your...
The time is up already?
Yep, we go right through this. The contract with America is almost certain to be a bad bargain for all Americans living in large cities. Increasing numbers of people in visible and desperate poverty, and an overall deterioration in housing, public education, and health services won't stop with the very poor alone. All people of modest means will see a dramatic decline in their quality of life. The very rich will be able to run, perhaps. The millions of working people who have invested their lives in the cities that made America great will only be able to sue the politicians for a breach of contract at the ballot box and suffer through another bleak time for this nation. Before I sign off, those of you who wish to learn more about issues covered by the Urban Agenda, Cablevision, and newspaper columns may call or write the Community Service Society of New York for a free copy of the collected Urban Agenda articles. The number is 212-254-8900. This is David R. Jones. Thank you for joining us.
To comment on the Urban Agenda or for more information on CSS, contact Community Service Society of New York, 105 East 22nd Street, New York, New York, 10010. Area code 212-254-8900.